What is happening, y'all? A lot going on with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They add I would say a little bit of beef, a lot of beef to the defensive line. I'm going to tell you about that and the Calvin Ridley fallout. All of it will tie it in together here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, folks? I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. We are free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. And if you're watching, that's where you are right now. Make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and also hit that bell so you'll get a notification each and every time we drop an episode. Wherever you get your audio podcast, make sure you check in on that location every single day so you don't miss out. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you for joining us every single day. You can be an everyday if you're not one. All you got to do is join us every single day. Now, I got to look at my phone because I sent myself a message. There's a couple of little girls that watch this show and listen to this show in the car every single day with their dad. That is little Avery and Aiden, two beautiful young princesses that always sing the Locked On Jaguars jingle and even tell their pops, who is serving our country in the military, they always say your team every day. So we wanted to shout them out and make sure that they have a really good day going to school when they listen to this tomorrow. Now let's get to it. We're gonna bury the lead. A lot has happened in 24 hours since you heard from me. Obviously, you didn't hear from me because I had some personal business to tend to. But now you got me, right? I'm here. And I'm here to tell you we don't have Calvin Ridley. You all know that already. I didn't say anything about it. I put out a little short for you guys to really tap into. So we'll talk about that segment 2. In segment 3, I'm going to talk about how the NFL is like the transfer portal, especially here in Jacksonville. Do you notice all the 2- and 3-year contracts? Remember the days of the 4- and 5-year deals? That is no more. I'm going to tell you why that can be good, but can also be bad. And we'll do that in segment 3 after we tie it all together. But first, the new addition to the Jacksonville Jaguars, defensive tackle Arik Armstead. You close your eyes, you might think it's Calais Campbell, but it's not. He's tall, he's 6'7", 290 some odd pounds, very good player from the San Francisco 49ers that they wanted to keep. But Arik wasn't taking no pay cut. Arik said he wanted to get some new, fresh money, and I do not blame him. But guess what? Guy that had a lot of experience with him in San Francisco, Trent Baalke, is the GM. They got the deal done, 3 years, $51 million. I don't know all of the details as of yet. I've been in transit, but that's the crux of it. It checks off another box, and it checks off a box with a very good player. I'm going to tell you why I like this signing. Not only is it because it's a position of need, but because of the guys that he's going to be lining up next to. A healthy Devon Hamilton. Trayvon Walker is going to stay right where he needs to stay in an even front. And, of course, Josh Allen, who is on the franchise tag. Hopefully they work something out and less than that and give him a big deal. By the way, it's going to be big. It's going to be huge if they're able to get Josh Allen under a long-term deal. Now, why is this good other than the fact that they checked the box? Because up to this point, I had said I named the top Jaguar players on the team prior to free agency, and they had to upgrade, right? I said it was Trevor Lawrence, obviously, Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker. Those are 3. Those are the top 3 players I believe on the team. I think Anton Harrison has already cemented himself into that group, also into the next little group. If we're doing a group of 6 or 7, Anton Harrison, Travis Etienne, that's 5, right? And as much as I like Andre Cisco, he's got to be a little bit more healthy for me to include him in that right now. So I guess it's Foye Oluwakan, who would be like number 6, right? What I said was they spent all of this money. They haven't changed who their top 6 players are. And some of y'all might think that, well, that's not a prerequisite to free agency. That's not really what they needed to do. what that represented for me is that Baalke still believed that the top guys on this team were enough. And it didn't include Calvin Ridley. It included Calvin Ridley until he was a free agent. And once he was a free agent and he left, he was also in that 5 or 6. It wasn't the case anymore. So what it was almost as if he's saying those guys are good enough to be our best players. So we're going to supplement those guys. They're going to inject talent into the middle of the team and push the floor down instead of when people say you're raising the floor. It's not always a situation where you target those number 47, 48, 49, 50 and get rid of those guys. Sometimes the way you do it is you come right in there like 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and it pushes everybody down a little bit, right? So my thing was I was really, really hoping what the Jaguars would do was get me somebody that I could argue with you guys that cracks that top 5 or 6. Why is that important to me? It's because when you line up and go against other teams, especially when the games really, really count towards the end of, well, all of them count, but I mean, with games that you really have to win, I'm looking at a team like the Chiefs and I'm going Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones, Snead or McDuffie, however you want to put it, and then the interior line, right, with Thuney and the center and then Trey Smith. And I was thinking like, well, damn, do we have one guy better than any of those dudes? And then you look at Cincinnati and you go Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Hendrickson, and you're thinking like, do we have anybody that can stop the bleeding? And that's what you need. You need a guy that's just that dude. You need a guy that everybody can look at and say, do something, right? Arik Armstead is the kind of guy that will do something. He actually is someone we could legitimately argue and say, they got better at the top. They didn't just get better in the middle. They didn't just inject stuff into the middle of this team. They actually got a dude that's really, really good. And maybe, just maybe, as good as he's been in San Francisco, he'll continue to do that and maybe even be more of a good player, sort of like the guy I mentioned earlier, Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell's a Pro Bowler, but guess what? Calais Campbell had his best years of his career when he got here in Jacksonville after being in the league for a long time. I think it's a home run. I'll give Trent Baalke credit because I'm going to beat up on him in segment 2 like I usually do. But this is a really, really good deal. And it came in, the average per year, that number came in a lot lower than a lot of people expected because there was a lot of speculation that it was somewhere between 21 and 24. It's 17. At least the Duval County school system, I don't think it failed me. When you go 3 into 51, I think that comes out to 17. So that is a very, very good number. Don't know the particulars, don't know the guaranteed portion of the contract. But to give you a little bit of insight, that's almost the same amount of total money that Daniil Hunter got from Houston, but he got his in 2 years. And just about all of it's guaranteed with the exception of $1 million. And I was wondering about that. Why are they so petty? You give a dude 2 years and $51 million or $50 million and say 49 is guaranteed. Where the other million at? What's going on with that? But anyway, that's their business. I'm just glad that they didn't get him, and I'm glad the Titans didn't get him because now the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think, have a formidable front 4 on defense. They're going to get after the quarterback, and I'm licking my chops because we're not just adding him to that group. We're adding him to that group coached by Ryan Nielsen, who is going to get the absolute most out of that group. And now a guy like Roy Robertson Harris, to answer the question that the sheriff asked me, I don't know if they cut him because of the way his contract is structured. I do know that he's probably where he needs to be, and that is a depth football player for this team. He's a rotational guy. Now, you can go back and argue whether or not the money they gave him is worth it. It doesn't matter. He's a rotational football player. He's the ardent key of this team now, and I really do believe the Jacksonville Jaguars, wait a minute, I'm about to say it, you ain't going to believe it, they actually got a lot better today. Now, what about the wide receivers? Do they have enough? Don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to give you my best guess. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Calvin Ridley fallout before we get to segment 3, where I talk about how the NFL has turned into the transfer portal a little bit. And I'm not just talking about guys changing teams. They always did that. I'm not just talking about the money. What I'm talking about is the way these contracts are structured. These teams are going to be rebuilding the team every 2 or 3 years. And that is something that we are not used to in the NFL. So hang on to your seats, man. We're going to get to all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. I got to let you know, though, as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best Major League season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the Major League Baseball experts, the local experts on Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, we're going to talk about Calvin Ridley, the wide receivers on this team, and what possibly happened, the ramifications and the repercussions from him going to a division rival. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. First, I got to let you know about the Game Time app. That's right, man. How many times have you heard this, especially when you were a kid, when you procrastinated on doing something that you should have been doing? Your lack of planning is not my responsibility and my emergency. I promise you, my kids will tell you that they have heard that a lot because, well, it's true. But guess who won't say that to you? Game Time won't say that to you. You know why? Because your lack of planning falls right into their wheelhouse and what they do and what they specialize in. And that is getting you tickets to any event, whether that is a football game, a play, a concert, a comedy show. It does not, monster trucks, wrestling, it does not matter. If they're putting it on in front of people and they're selling tickets, Game Time will do it for you. And they'll make sure you get them as soon as possible, even after the event starts. And you ain't never too late now. You can see the view of your seat before you buy it, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All in prices show your total up front, so you are not getting only a great deal, but you're getting the great deal before checkout. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. All right, here's what you got to do. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On, LOCKEDON, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We love to thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Appreciate the everydayers joining us here. I see y'all in the comments. We are live on this live episode of Locked On Jaguars. I ain't real good at multitasking on a day like today. That's between me and my man Ross Jackson knows what's going on. So I won't be reading a whole bunch of comments, but I will say thank you all for making those comments, and I may try to answer them after the show. Hopefully you get your answers while I'm talking. All right, I didn't say much on the Calvin Ridley issue last night. I was probably in shock, just like everybody else, that Calvin Ridley, not that he didn't come back, because I had heard some rumblings, but where he actually went. He went to the Tennessee Titans. That's good. Get paid, young brother, get paid. Nobody's tripping on you getting a bag, right? And I'm different from other people. You know, I don't just host Locked On Jaguars. I also host Locked On NFL one day a week. So I got to try to be not the fan guy. And you guys know that we know that the way I do this show as I try to be entertaining. I also try to be informative, but at the same time, I try to take my blinders off, right? And not do it as a fan of the Jaguars, but do it as a fan of Jacksonville, Florida, and do it as a fan of the fans of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that being neutral like that really helps me get the information out the way it needs to get out. It hurt. I'm not going to lie to you. It stung. Not that he didn't come back, because I don't build everything on one football player. And I just don't ever think that it's all about one guy. But what it represented was, it represented something that we seem to have a problem with around here. And it's not just on Trent, because this is really Trent's first time having to deal with this. My good friend Dave Caldwell, he had the same problem and before. What it is when you get a good football player that earns a new contract, somehow we always find a way to not get them and make them come back. And then it's a guy that you traded for. And to all of the people out there talking about this Calvin Ridley situation saying, we didn't need him anyway, he wasn't that. That's not the point. The point is they wanted him. They wanted him. And if you're going to have the attitude that you didn't need him anyway, then they shouldn't have traded for him, right? Don't make that trade if you're not going to retain him. They need to seriously consider. They are handicapping themselves and tying their hands behind their back because they're operating the way other teams are not operating. And what that is they are not negotiating, and this is Trent Baalke's policy. He does not negotiate contracts during the season. I don't know why he does it, but the thing is if other people are willing to do it, negotiating either not Calvin's deal, but Josh Allen's deal and getting that done, guess what happens? Guess what happens? You tag Ridley. You don't allow this to happen. I just want the Jaguars to get out in front of everything instead of being reactionary, because by the time you react, it's too late. If you're out in front of it, that tells me that as the GM that's in the building every day, that you have your finger on the pulse of the team. Injuries happen. Well, some people say, well, he probably didn't negotiate the contract during the season because what if he tears an ACL? Fine. What if you wait till after the season and you sign him and he tears his ACL in practice? You can't operate with scared money. And ain't nobody going to get mad at you if that happens, right? Because the stuff like that happens. So the weird part is, and this will tie into those 3-year contracts, is if you got a 4 or 5 year deal, if he gets hurt, you still got 3 servable years. If you sign some of these dudes to these 3-year contracts where you can get out in 2 years and they get injured, guess what? They got 1 year of service and that year is a year that they're rehabbing. So it's very, very difficult to have a program when the contracts are so short. And then, we'll get into this in segment 3. The thing with Ridley is it was basically a rental. It was a rental for 1 year. Now, I know there's smoke and there's talk out here that they may trade something for Brandon Ayuk. What could it be? Could it be a late round pick and a pick swap, maybe 17 for 31? A flip-flop? We got to look at the Jimmy Johnson chart and find out exactly what that value is. I'll try to pull that up for you right now and tell you exactly what the value is for that chart, that flip. And I'll tell you right now. There you go. The old, and everybody doesn't necessarily use this anymore. It's not necessarily something that everyone uses, but I'll just go ahead and guess it that to move up from 31 to move up from 31 to 17, the point differential. So 17 it's 950 on the chart. 31 is 600. So that's 350. Now you go on the chart and find out what 350 represents on this chart. There you go. It's the 55th pick overall. So that is a second round pick. That's extremely valuable. They may want some change. A little 6th round pick to throw in there to add some value to it. So let's just say you give them a 6th round pick that's in the middle of the just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say, okay, you give them a 6th round pick that's like in the middle of the draft. There you go, another 25, 30 points. So now you're giving them the value they want. I think a pick swap might get it done, and you throw a late pick in, and then this is critical. Now you got to get Josh Allen under contract long term to lower his cap number. And what you can do with that is turn that money around and give it to Brandon Ayuk. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Calvin Ridley got $23 million, Brandon Ayuk is going to get 25, 26. That's the way that goes. But I wouldn't do the deal unless he agreed to a contract extension first, right? I think if you do that, it could happen. I also think if you do that, he's better than Calvin Ridley. So you kind of fell backwards into your plan, or maybe it was a contingency plan all along. I'll give Trent more credit than that I don't think he's shooting from the hip, man. I think he's calculated. I also don't think that he's a bad executive, I just don't think he needs to be on top. He doesn't need to make the final decision because I don't think he is a big picture GM when it comes to. I think Trent is like everybody else. You can think that you're right about it and be convicted and go down swinging, and I respect that, right? I really, really do. But sometimes you can be a little bit too stubborn, and that's what I really, really think it is. I just think any system that allows you to be locked into a rule where you don't extend contracts during the season, I think you handicap yourself and you allow the vultures to circle your team. And then you're dealing with agents that may not rock with you. And You're dealing with players that have a reputation of thinking that you don't take care of your own. And granted, with Jalen and Yannick and everybody wants to say, well, it was different situations or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still a situation where you had a great player that's not here anymore. So they got to get out of that, and they can't be the team that continues to do that, because if they do, that's what agents and players are going to start thinking, that they care more about other people's players and giving them big money than they do about retaining their own. Speaking of retention, it's very, very important that you come back for segment 3, and I'll tell you why. It's kind of like the transfer portal, and it's taking a serious element of team building away. I'll explain what that is, and I'll also explain why having to rebuild your team and retool your team every 2 years is particularly bothersome and troublesome for me, because I don't trust the guy in that aspect. And now you're asking them to do it over and over and over, not just to add people, but to totally flip. How many guys they let go? 7 to 8 guys, and then they brought in 7 to 8, and then they go. That's a lot of movement to go adding with your draft picks, 14, 15, 16 dudes to your roster every single year. It's like a third of your roster. So you can't get the continuity. I'm going to tell you about all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. First, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, man, we're going to run it down and talk about a little team building and the effects that everything that's transpired over the last couple of days has on our present and the future, and why the NFL, to me, is turning into the transfer portal from college. We'll talk about it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's episode is sponsored and brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. Third, final segment here on Locked On Jaguars with your team every day. We thank you for making the first list. I got 215 people watching on YouTube. Before I get to this portal comparison, let me do some of these comments. Didn't need Ayuk if we lose more draft capital and still have to pay him. Double whammy. I got you. This move means nothing. Their offense is terrible. I don't know who you are when you say their offense is terrible. So we'll act like you just a hater. A lot of the play calling was due to a bad center that has been addressed now, and the play calling will benefit. Okay, so there's like a little argument going on over in the comments. And I ain't going to sit here and break it up. Y'all go ahead and fight each other because y'all ain't fighting in person, so it doesn't really matter. Pay attention to the show, man. Quit arguing. Stop all that beefing over there. Like I've been blocking and people. Let me tell you where the block button comes in at. When you question my character and my integrity and think that I make stuff up, you got to go. So if that's what you want, that's what you do. But over here, you guys can go ahead and fight all you want to, right? I understand that Brandon Ayuk had 1,300 yards last season. I got a big old computer sitting right here in front of me. I do my stuff organically, so hopefully I don't sit here and just read a bunch of random stats and numbers and tell you what the analytics and the metrics say. I'll tell you what my eyeballs tell you. in my opinion and based on the people that I've talked to. So I appreciate everybody telling me all of that stuff, but that stuff doesn't mean anything to me. What I'm more concerned with is the fact that these 2 and 3 year deals bother me. I'll give you an example. I always talking about building a house and elevating and getting past the slab. And once you see the elevation and you see the roof and you see the windows, and eventually you're going to have a very nice residence, the residence of a really, really good football team, right? How can they ever get to that point when just in 2021, they signed a bunch of guys and I don't even know who's here. Roy Robinson Harris is still here. Brandon Sheriff is still here, but they replaced them. They even replaced most of those dudes with cheaper replacement when you consider there's been 2 and 3 years and inflation didn't come in. So it's almost like you got a bunch of renegades, right? And there's a part of team building that I really, really like. And there's a program where you bring guys in and you cycle them out and you replace and you do it as you go along. It does show that you're not being stubborn. It also shows that you're willing to continue to change and not have an ego about the guys that you chose and the guys you picked. And I get it. And that's a part of it too. But here is the kicker. The way that you supplement that is to also develop talent, 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks. I keep using the example of Kyron Williams being 3rd in the league in rushing and Puka Nacua leading the league in receptions. The Rams replaced people. Puka Nacua outplayed Cooper Kupp, who was coming back from an injury. You would be thinking that, man, their first wide receivers banged up. Cooper Kupp says, hold my beer. I got it. I'll lead the league in receiving. That's how it is done. You have to, and you're not going to hit on all your draft picks, but you need to hit on enough of them to make sure that what you can do is start retaining your own players as opposed to continuing going out, getting players from somewhere else. That will require you to draft very, very well beyond the obvious, which is the 1st round. Trent Baalke has not done that. Trent Baalke has not drafted a wide receiver here that has made any noise. If they get Ayuk and they had Ridley and they had they got Gabe Davis, they got Zay Jones. I don't know if he's going to still be here or not. They got Christian Kirk. All of those dudes were signed in free agency. All of them. Your 3rd receiver is a dude making $13 million a year. That's weird. No rookie production whatsoever. For instance, Puka Nacua and all that money they're saving from getting all of that production, they put it in their offensive line and they signed a whole bunch of dudes. They signed offense. They didn't sign guys to bargains. They signed football players that they know can get after it and get it done right now. The better you draft, the better you can go out now and cherry pick and pay top guys to inject talent into the top of your team, as opposed to always making up for the fact that you ain't developed nobody and you're just swapping guys out year after year and you're getting nothing from the draft other than your 1st round pick, which is easy scouting. That's why I say it's like the transfer portal, with the exception, everybody's signing guys to 2 and 3 year deals. But guess who's developing players? The ones with that Lombardi trophy out in Kansas City. Go look at the guys that they've developed. Doesn't mean they hit on them all, but they are replacing players. Like if they trade L'Jarius Sneed, they got McDuffie, and they're gonna get another guy. And everybody is confident that Brett Veach and Andy Reid and Mike Bradway and their whole crew out there, they are very, very confident. And Borgonzi ain't gonna forget about him, that they're gonna draft another dude, Creed Humphrey, the center. They fix everything through the draft because they have a type. And that's not, I'm not talking about traits. I'm talking about they have a type. Smart football players, heady guys that come in and they're ready to contribute right away. And they know exactly what they're going to do with them. They know exactly, Pacheco, the running back, they know exactly where they're going to inject them. They get it. And we have to start getting it here too. The difference is it's going to be very, very difficult in the future, because guess what's happening? You see what's happening in Cincinnati. They had to let go Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon wasn't taking no pay cut. Joe Mixon gets out on the market, gets his last bite of the apple, because, you think Leonard Fournette and Dalvin Cook, they're already out. Joe Mixon is like, no, I'm going to be like Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara from that same class. I'm going to get me one more payday. But they had to let him go. They had to let Jesse Bates go last year. But here's what they did. They prepared for it. You know what they did? They drafted Daxton Hill a year before Bates was a free agent. And they just swapped him in and plugged him in. So now Bates leaves, they get 3 years of a discount for all that production. Him and Taylor Britt, guys in the secondary. Everybody that they literally had to replace, they were able to do it with younger players. You know why it's important? Because Joe Burrow's extension kicks in. T. Higgins is franchised. And a year later, they're going to have to extend or franchise Jamar Chase. Keeping those top guys at high salaries, those top 3 or 4 guys, the triplets, and allowing them to grow into the future together. And you can do that because you drafted well and you're getting not only just cheap players, you're getting cheap players that produce like expensive players. It is critical that they draft well. I'm not sure that Baalke's going to draft well on day 2 and day 3. Therefore, that area has to improve because once they extend Trevor Lawrence and they give Josh Allen this long-term deal, they will have their 2 or 3 guys at the very top making a bunch of money. And now they're going to have to supplement that with dudes that they get in the draft that can play really, really well and produce. You guys produce every single day coming here with me on Locked On Jaguars, and I am eternally grateful for it. We thank you. Join us again tomorrow. We'll have another episode. We'll see what the Jaguars do for the rest of the evening. Until tomorrow, take care of each other, and I'll see you next time on Locked On Jaguars.